And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewbs, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewbs, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dewbs and Kerr. Well, hello there, it's 6 o'clock. I'm Michelle Dewbs, and this is Dewbs and Kerr, the show where we'll get into some of the things that have got you talking today. Now, let me ask you this. Were you a Brexiteer? Are you still a Brexiteer? Well, one of the very high-profile Brexiteers has come out today and said that we basically don't have the Brexit that many people have voted for. He is saying that he wants more foreign labour to be able to enter the UK. Is he right? I want your thoughts on that. And private school, would you send your kids to private school? I've got to be honest, I think most people would, if indeed they could afford it, because why wouldn't you? However, I have to be honest, we know that private school kids, they do dominate, don't they? A lot of the top jobs, the upper echelons of society. But is that tide a turning? Do you think we're going to get to the point where people are almost discriminated against because they went to private school? Is that the right thing or not? And by the way, to me, it's not even just about education. It's about how do you prosper in life without a network? Because to me, it's about who you know sometimes, not necessarily what you know. So I want your thoughts on that. And also, you know, get this, I think, quite frankly, the police have got a lot of crime that they should be busy fighting, and the courts have a lot of criminals that they should be busy locking up. But get this. A 70-odd-year-old fella being locked up for 6 months because he served wine and mince pies during lockdown. I mean, give me a break. And I wonder and worry just how many of these other COVID lockdown breaches are in the system. Frankly, I think we've got better things to be doing than chasing them. So I reckon we need a COVID lockdown amnesty. You know what? If you broke the rules, let's just move on. Do you agree with me or not? Give me your thoughts on all of that. And first, we'll bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. The top story on GB News tonight, just over 7 million people in England are now waiting to start routine hospital treatment, and that's a new record high. The latest data released by NHS England shows that over 400,000 patients have been waiting more than 12 months for healthcare. A&E waiting times have also reached their highest level since 2010, and 1 in 5 patients who've had surgery cancelled had to wait longer than 28 days for a new appointment. And all that, as the Health Secretary says, he's had a constructive meeting with the Royal College of Nursing. The union's been urging the government to take action over pay or face industrial action in healthcare settings across the country. Steve Barclay says they've agreed to meet again to avoid walkouts. The government says the union's asking for a 17.6% pay boost. Meanwhile, 100,000 civil servants have voted in favour of national strike action over pay, pensions and jobs. The Public and Commercial Services Union says the move means industrial action will take place across a range of services. Workers affected include driving test examiners, border force officials and job centre staff. And in yet more strike action, teachers in Scotland have just announced their first strike date after voting overwhelmingly for industrial action. Members of the EIS union working in schools across the country will walk out on the 24th of November. It comes 3 months after they rejected an offer of 5% pay increase. Further dates are going to be decided upon tomorrow. And as if that wasn't enough, train drivers across the country are set to strike on the 26th of November. Members of ASLEF at 12 train companies are involved in a long-running dispute over pay. They're among several rail unions on strike this month, including the RMT and Unite. Meanwhile, a tube strike has been causing disruption today across London with limited services on the tube. Rail Minister Hugh Merriman says the government can't keep funding the industry.
We have continued to support the railways, with over £16 billion earmarked since March 2020, protecting thousands of jobs whilst keeping goods and people moving. But that level of support, equivalent to £600 per household, is unsustainable. Rail, like all parts of the economy, must now earn the right to grow.
Now, Downing Street says the Prime Minister has been speaking to Ukraine's President today, reiterating the UK's unwavering support for the country. Rishi Sunak this morning reassured President Zelensky the UK would continue to provide military aid, including more than 25,000 extreme weather kits for troops. It follows Russia's withdrawal yesterday from the strategic southern city of Kherson. Here, a man from Somerset has been sentenced to life in prison for murdering his partner who died 21 years after he set her on fire. 58-year-old Stephen Craig left Jacqueline Kirk severely disfigured after the attack in Weston-super-Mare back in 1998. Craig had already served 15 years in prison, was arrested again last year after Jacqueline died from her injuries in 2019. His sentence carries a minimum of 15 years to be served. The Queen Consort has commemorated victims of the nation's wars at a ceremony at Westminster Abbey today. Camilla laid a cross in the field of remembrance in memory of those who died in past conflicts. More than 1,000 veterans gathered in the grounds of the Abbey to join dignitaries in observing a 2-minute silence. And just lastly, the England manager Gareth Southgate has named his 26-man squad for the World Cup in Qatar, which kicks off in just over a week's time. The FA made the announcement on the England Twitter feed. Leicester midfielder James Maddison has been included in the squad, as have Man United's Marcus Rashford, Newcastle's Callum Wilson and Man City's Kyle Walker, despite his recent injury problems. Former Tottenham, West Ham and Portsmouth manager Harry Redknapp told GB News it'll take more than skill to win the tournament.
Had a great drawing in the last World Cup. We got to the semi-final without really playing a decent team. And then we could get beat by Croatia. If the draw's in our favour, we can miss Argentina or Brazil or whoever. There's no reason we can't go very, very close again. I think we've got a big chance.
Harry Redknapp. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, the People's Channel. Let's go back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that, Polly. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock this evening, and keeping me company here in the studio, my panel, Kevin Craig is a former Labour councillor and the Chief Executive of PLMR Communications, and Charlotte Pickles, who's the Director of the Reform think tank, and you're the former advisor to Ian Duncan-Smith, am I right?
Yes.
Good. I like to check my memory every now and again, make sure that I'm not losing it. You guys know the drill, don't you, as well, on this show? It's not just about us here, it's about you at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me on email gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. So just a quick reminder, I want to talk to you tonight about the whole Brexit thing, but particularly when it comes to the immigration side of it. One of the most prominent Brexiteers reckons that it's not the Brexit that many people voted for. Where do you stand on that one? And private schools, I'm pondering tonight, would you send your kids, or your grandkids for that matter, quite frankly, to private school if you could afford it? I certainly would, and I think a lot of people would, but is it more a hindrance than a help going forward? Because there does seem to be a lot of people in the top jobs from private schools right now. Will there be a backlash against that? Will it go the other way? And I want to talk to you as well about COVID lockdown breaches. A 70-odd-year-old fella in the kind of Stoke-on-Trent region, he is just being jailed now. On paper, they will say he got jailed for perverting the course of justice. Long story short, he was in trouble for breaching the lockdown rules. He tried to tamper with some CCTV evidence and he's found himself in jail for 6 months. I think, quite frankly, it should never be getting investigated in this current day at all. Life's moved on, backlogs of crime, court backlogs. Move on, forget about it. Have a COVID lockdown amnesty. Do you agree with me? Or do you think I'm talking nonsense? If you broke the rules, then you should pay, even now. Tell me all your thoughts. GBViews at gbnews.uk is how you're going to reach me tonight. But let's get into our top story then, shall we? Let's talk about migration. We focus on it a lot, don't we? Particularly the comings and goings on the channel, which we all accept by now, is an absolute joke and entirely out of control. But what about people who legally do come here? They migrate, they want jobs here, whether it's, I don't know, picking fruit or working in factories, care homes, whatever. The reason I'm asking about this today is because a Brexit-backing businessman, Lord Wolfson, he is the chief executive of Next, you know, the clothing shop. He reckons that we need more migrants from overseas. He reckons it's not the Brexit that he voted for and that many people voted for and wanted. Charlotte Pickles, where do you stand on this? Do we need more immigration?
So I voted for Brexit, and I voted because I wanted the UK to have control and to be able to make our own decisions and make those decisions, or rather have our own elected leaders making those decisions and be able to kick them out if we disagree. I didn't vote because I wanted no immigration. I voted because I wanted to control who could come in to do what, based on what the country thinks is appropriate. So I'm quite relaxed with the idea that where we have significant vacancies, which we do, and in particular sectors, so I think Lord Wolfson has talked about, you know, things like, as you mentioned, picking fruit or working in factories, where companies really, really struggle to get British workers to do those roles. I've got no problem with saying, of course, if there are people who want to come from other countries and do those jobs, which is a good thing for the economy, let's be clear, then why shouldn't they be? As long as that's us making the decision and not just some blanket EU rule that says we have to let them in. Mm-hmm.
Where do you stand, Kevin?
Well, I think Lord Wolfson has got a cheek. Let's remember his quote. The UK is better off outside the European Union because otherwise we'll face a long era of low growth without radical change. And under this guy, the Next share price has dropped 44% in the year to date. And I think he's got a cheek. OK, as a major cheerleader of Brexit, what did he think would happen now moaning about immigration when tackling immigration, cracking down on immigration was a big... Charlotte may not have voted for it for that reason, but loads of listeners and viewers did, I reckon. And so what did he think would happen? And as a business person, no wonder their share price is down 44%. Listen to this. He still says it could work by you could incentivise businesses to hire UK workers by making firms pay a 10% tax to the government on salaries of foreign hired labour. Now, we've seen here agriculture and fruit production, farmers and companies going out of business, and he thinks that will be solved by them finding people but adding 10% on top. I mean, he's living in a dreamland, and he got what he campaigned for, and now he's upset about it. It's a joke.
I think it's got a little bit of a cheek as well, but for different reasons to you. Because many people, I ran for the Brexit party, so I mean it's no secret where my thoughts lay on that issue. But to me, people wanted control of immigration, and that was a fundamental point. It is, to me, bonkers that you would not have control over your borders, your rules, your principles, whatever. But for me, Lord Woolf, he's talking about inability to access staff. You get it all over the different sectors, all the rest of it. So I was clearly a little bit bored this afternoon, so I looked at some of his job vacancies. So he's advertising roles in Next, or Next, should I say, to be accurate, is advertising roles, paying £6.89 per hour to £9.50 per hour. So then I think to myself, listen, my friend, if you're struggling to attract... Because don't make out you're the patron saint of the fruit pickers. I think what you really mean is you can't get your staff for your shops. Right. But that does not surprise me when you are paying £6.89 to £9.50. Now, just to be clear, because I know people will write in and say that's below the minimum wage. It's not actually, because you can pay 18 to 20-year-olds £6.83. But if you do pay literally on the cusp of minimum wage, you are going to struggle because fellow retailers, Aldi, £10.50, Lidl, £10.90.
He's got a cheap, Michelle. And, you know, he himself has chucked over £500,000 to the Conservatives in the past decade, and then he's offering that, you know, to workers.
But there you go. And, Charlotte, this was one of the key tenets of the Brexit debate. People wanted to stop organisations using cheap foreign labour.
I mean... I'm certainly not going to defend offering those sorts of wages.
And they are legal. I do want to stress that. They are within the confines of the national minimum wage and the living wage, depending on the age. But my point is that you're so close to that... You're so close to paying people the very bare minimum that you can.
And in a cost of living crisis as well. So no, I mean, I think it's appalling. I think you should offer a fair wage to do a job. But I think there is still an issue here in terms of the volume of vacancies we have. And actually, if we want, you know, a dynamic, booming economy benefits us all, right? All of us will benefit, whether that's from having a well-paid job, whether it's from the fact that we can then afford to pay for good public services because you need the taxes in a vibrant economy to pay for them. So actually, if that requires us allowing more people in to come and specifically work, so people get very upset at the idea that, and I think this played a big role during the Brexit campaigns, people get very upset about the idea that people are coming to the UK to, you know, not do their bit, let's put it that way, right? So maybe to claim benefits, because we do have a pretty generous system.
To scrounge. Do you mean to scrounge?
I'm not going to use the word, but there were certainly suggestions that was the reason. And the illegal immigrants, people are rightly very upset at that. That's not what we're talking about here. And actually, when you look at a lot of polling on this subject, Britain's really open-minded to the idea that if there are people who are coming in, prepared to do jobs, pay their way, pay their taxes in doing those jobs, do their bit, then people are pretty relaxed about it, actually. So I think the important thing is having that control. You know, Lord Wolfson should pay decent wages and maybe he wouldn't have vacancies if that is the issue driving this. But actually, you know, even pre-Brexit, you know, you would have farmers, you would have other less attractive roles, let's put it that way, employers with those roles struggling, because actually a lot of people in this country don't want to do those jobs. And sure, maybe if you could, I don't know, quadruple the pay to do something like that, to go and do back-breaking work, then perhaps we might attract them. But it hasn't worked to try and attract British workers, and yet we all know we want those roles filled, right? We want the stuff picked, we want the animals looked after, we want the factories staffed. That's why we're seeing empty shelves.
But then, tell me at home, by the way, did you used to be, or are you maybe now still like a fruit picker or something like that? Because I remember, Kevin, I remember it vividly. I've got quite a few siblings, and I remember my siblings, they used to get picked up in a minibus at the top of the street, and they used to get ferried off to whichever fields, whatever. They used to do things like, I think it was cucumber picking or whatever else it was. I swerved that one because I got a job in a pub kitchen instead, so I didn't have to do that. But I know that my siblings did do it. I know a lot of people I went to school with, they did do it in school holidays, whatever. Why do you think it might be that people used to do that role and perhaps now don't want to?
I don't know, Michelle. I don't know. I do know that it got worse, which won't be popular here. It's got worse since Brexit. You know.
What has?
The struggle of farmers to make a living.
But don't you think it might have got worse? I know that, without being too rude, you do kind of worship a little bit, or you did, at the altar of the COVID lockdowns and things like that.
That's rude.
And, well, I did caveat it. I did caveat it and say I don't want to be too rude. But let me tell you my point. I'll tell you why I think it's relevant. Because I think what's happened is that all of these people that wanted lockdowns and wanted COVID restrictions and wanted furlough, a lot of people were furloughed. And then they went home. So they were paid to do their job or not, as the case may be. And then they went back to, I don't know, wherever their family are. And then they sat there and they realised, actually, what have I been doing? I've been commuting in or living in this expensive city, earning not a lot of money, when actually I want to be back where I'm from with my family. So I don't always blame it on Brexit. I think COVID and the response to COVID shook everything up a bit.
Right. Well, look, I mean, I was agreeing with you there for a minute in our mutual condemnation of Lord Wolfson. And
and now I've lost it. I've lost it.
Because, look, I don't agree with the analysis that COVID is the cause of not...
No, not COVID, the COVID response.
The COVID response. Okay, I think that's a separate debate.
Why is it?
Well, because this is about Brexit, right?
No, this is about work. Not. If you look at when most of the EU nationals left, it was actually just shortly after the first lockdown. And actually 6 million people applied for settled status. So that's the people who were here when Brexit happened were given... And don't be wrong, way too late in the day. There should have been a much more generous offer on the table immediately. But they were given a generous offer to apply for settled status, and 6 million people did. We don't have 6 million people living here, and the majority of those people left during the pandemic.
The message that we gave out with Brexit was broadly to a lot of people, you're not welcome here, right? Get back home. But that happened. And the discussion here, the pandemic response was one thing, but what happened?
It was a key thing.
Yeah, but, well, in your opinion, it was.
No, the data shows pretty much common sense.
No. What the data shows about Brexit was, OK, to go back to what triggered this, though, is Wolfson is complaining, the guy who's seen the share price drop by 44% in a year, he didn't get the immigration changes he wanted, all right? Where's he going to go next? Is he going to complain?
Pay higher wages, yes. And then all of these UK people might want to, instead of going to work at Aldi or Lidl or whatever, they might want to go work at
Indeed, and I think hopefully he'll hear the advice you've given him. Is he going to complain next he didn't get the red bus money into the NHS that was promised from Brexit?
But why are you so keen to not agree that actually, my theory on COVID, you paid people to sit at home, so they went home and then they realised, actually, life's better for me when I'm around my family, when I'm around a bigger home.
People?
No, I'm talking about European people, well, British people as well, actually. A lot of British people that perhaps lived in London might have migrated away back to their home cities. But surely you must think that paying people not to work made them readjust and reassess their life and perhaps not re-enter the workplace as they once did.
Well, no, I think, as I recall it, paying furlough was about stopping the economy from collapsing, and there was cross-party agreement on that.
But I'm asking you, well, I don't agree that actually we should have been having these prolonged lockdowns in the first place, but I'm keen not to reopen the lockdown one because I know we're on different sides.
Please don't.
So what I'm saying to you is the fact that not you, but we paid people to sit at home, made people think, I'm not going to sit in my poxy little bed sit in London, I'm going to go home, what I call home, Yorkshire, Spain, I don't know, Timbuktu, wherever home was.
It wasn't necessarily the paying them to stay at home. There was a lot of people who, understandably, given that we had a lot of quite young EU migrants working, particularly in areas, as you point out, like London. And so a lot of those people being put into a lockdown decided, I don't want to be locked down, like you're saying, on my own in a bedsit with people I don't really know. So actually they went home because they would rather be around people that they loved and knew. And what was quite a scary time, particularly in those initial stages, we didn't really know what was going on. I think it's less about the furlough scheme and more that did drive a lot of people to go back to where their families were, and they haven't returned.
Yeah, I'm not having it. I'm blaming it on furlough. Well, you've not convinced me otherwise. Go on, Kevin, what were you going to say?
I just think that the message... I've always accepted it's absolutely understandable that a lot of British people are worried about immigration and public services not keeping up, OK? And it's OK. You're not a racist to think like that, right? Which was something that was wrong that was said by a lot of people. But the way the debate happened around immigration, and it still does, it does, I'm afraid, it created a situation where loads of people didn't want to be here to do important jobs. And I think, this is about, Wolfson, go back to the question, has Brexit worked? Charlotte, would you vote the same way again today?
Yes.
You would?
Yeah.
What's better?
But
What's better?
I think that's the wrong question.
No, it's not. It's not. It's a massive question.
Well, I can give you an answer to that quite simply. That
Help her out then.
But we know. But maybe this is the same answer of why did I vote that way, and therefore what's better is that we can now control our own decisions.
Yes.
Right? And so you may argue that the government or the successive administrations we've had over the past few, what feels like just weeks, but years, haven't delivered on some of those things. And actually, I don't think Lord Wolfson is saying that we haven't, he wanted Brexit to unleash the kind of growth potential of Britain and that was only about immigration. That's a ludicrous argument to say that was only about immigration.
I'm just quoting
it was
his
about,
own speech.
No.
Brexit will increase growth.
Yes, which he hasn't said by increasing immigration, has
right? When this
that's about regulation. That's about opportunities, isn't it? That's not just about immigration. That's such a narrow thing to focus in on.
And also, I think we need to be sensible because you're quoting this speech and you're waving it. If you're listening, not watching, you won't know what I'm showing. But Kevin is waving this bit of paper around that he's got highlighted and everything because he wants to prove his point. That where he says this fella, the next fella, basically says that we're going to have a long area of growth. Basically, everything's going to be good. But this monumental sea change has happened since then too, in fact. You've had a global pandemic and a ridiculous response to it by closing the entire world down. And you've now got a war in Europe. He would not have been able to predict when he made that sentence back in 2016 that those two humongous things would have happened. So that Brexit vision hasn't had the opportunity to take foot and start moving.
I respect very much, Michelle, why you, as an ardent, long-term Brexiteer, want it to work. So you don't want to talk about it's cost the country 136 billion quid, said the Bank of England last week. It's harder to travel. There's more red tape.
Well, do you know what?
The NHS is
The Bank of England, actually, the Bank of England say a lot and they spend a lot of time talking. What they ought to spend a little bit more time doing, actually, is their primary role of managing inflation. Because if they spent less time making statements like what you've just given us, more time looking inwards at their own job, which is interest rates, if they'd have taken swifter action, we perhaps wouldn't be in the situation that we're in now. So that's what I would say to Andrew Bailey if he's listening. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break, so I'm going to come back. I'm going to have some of your thoughts on that one. Where do you sit on the Brexit issue and the staffing issue as well? And when we come back, I want to talk as well about a few things. I want to talk about COVID amnesty and much more, but guess what? I can't go to a break without telling you this interesting news. Are you ready? Yes. Well, guess where we're going to be next week? Do you know? Next week? Next Thursday, autumn statement. Jeremy Hunt, of course, is just going to reveal just how hard life is going to be for us going forward. Let's be honest about that. We're going to be out and about talking to you guys in front of a live studio audience in Southampton. So if you want to join the conversation with us about what you think about that new budget, life going forward, was it right? Was it wrong? How would you have done things? You can get yourself tickets and come and join us so you can. GBNews gbnews.co.uk is the website to get yourself a ticket. There you go. Do come and join us because we always have good fun. They're normally as well in a bit of a pub, which of course I do love. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll have your reactions to that whole Brexit situation. And I want to talk about private school. Would you send your kids to one if you could? And do you think it's going to be a disadvantage going forward or not? I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle,
Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Every Friday and Sunday night from 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight.
We're on the same page again. There's something weird happening.
Let Ian finish. Don't be such a cranky.
That mini budget was the tip of the iceberg.
And on Saturday, my show just got bigger. From 8, it's Mark Dolan's Saturday Night In.
You can't govern a country if you can't speak. Stop talking.
My God, we reached the end. I've never been early in my life. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs and Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight with my panel, Kevin Craig, who is a former Labour councillor and the Chief Exec of PLMR Communications, and Charlotte Pickles is the Director of the Reform think tank and a former advisor to Ian Duncan-Smith. We have just been talking about workforces, immigration, Brexit. This is all back off the back of the Chief Exec of Next basically saying that he's struggling to get staff, or many people are, and saying that we perhaps need more international workers. And we were questioning, by the way, about why so many people perhaps don't want to do some of the jobs that they once did. Polly says, I used to do fruit picking in the 60s. We did it because there were not the benefits then that there are now. Put frankly, we all had to work if we wanted to live. That is a big sense coming through, actually. Marion, you're quite harsh, there you are, Marion. A girl after my own heart, you say. Get the work shy off their backsides and introduce a no work, no benefits culture. That would soon resolve any employment shortages. You've got a plan for it, Marion, you say. People should have 3 job offers, and if they then don't take a job and keep it, you get no further benefits. 22%, by the way, of working-age people are economically inactive in this country, but, and there is a big but, don't forget, of course, some of those people have caring responsibilities and things like that. Some of them perhaps might not be able to work. I don't know, they might be ill, disabled, whatever. But I do think if you are physically able to work, then you absolutely should. And I think your suggestion, Marianne, is quite a sensible one. Right, let's talk private school, shall we? Where do you stand on this? Do we kind of still doff our caps, if you like, to people that have been to private school? The reason I'm asking this is academics have delved into a who's who. Do you know what that is? It's a catalogue of the rich, famous perhaps, and influential people in our society. And what they've found is that when it comes to women, the positions dominated by girls, pretty much, were basically people, there's a big fly in front of me, everyone, sorry about that. They were dominated by girls who've been to just 12 private schools. Right. So what let's make it all clear. I think we all pretty much know that a lot of the top jobs, they are dominated by private school people. Is private school almost like a guarantee, if you like, Kevin, to success?
No, it's not a guarantee. I think it helps. It gives kids networks. It gives them. It often selects pupils of a higher academic ability, not always. So it makes teaching easier. You've got less rowdy kids in them. I mean, I recall a very rough secondary school in South London being spat on, hit with the backs of chairs. There was a lot of racism, violence. You tend not to get that so much in private schools. And that's why, you know, parents often choose to put their money there for their kids. Increasingly, a lot of these independent schools give a lot of bursaries and scholarships. You know, they know
And you
they've got
didn't go to
modernised.
private school?
I didn't go to private school, but I've got no problem with parents.
Would you send your kids to private school?
We have done, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got no problem with it. And I think you've got to be strongly careful not to be hypocritical in education. If parents have the means to do it, they should be allowed to, and it should be the ambition of every politician to make state schools so good that no one bothers anymore.
Yeah, you see, I've got to be honest, right? If you'd have asked me a few years ago, Michelle, if you have kids, will you send them to private school? I categorically would have said absolutely not. I didn't know anyone that went to private school. That wasn't a thing in my life, my family, my circles. Now that I've got a child, if I could afford it, and I could afford the whole thing, you don't want your kids to be like that one out of the in-betweeners that has to leave halfway through, but if you could afford to see the course, then I think I probably would. Because I would think to myself, right, do I want my kid, to Kevin's point, in a class filled with 30-odd unruly kids, or do I want him taught with 8 kids, 10 kids, whatever? I would choose the latter, and I think most people would. But, Charlotte, I wonder, because I do feel like there's becoming a bit of a backlash to people that have gone to private school. It's almost becoming a little bit of a, I don't know what the word is, like a tipping point against them. So I wonder, do you think if it's going to end up down the line as being a disadvantage?
No. No, I don't.
Never?
So I think it's entirely understandable that I don't have children. I'm in the category you were in, Michelle, in that I don't have children, but I categorically wouldn't send my children to private school.
So you were like me, so tell me why.
Exactly. Being really honest, I don't believe in it. I went to my local state comprehensive, it was fine. It wasn't a terrible school. So I guess my parents were lucky that the school down the road wasn't, failing. It wasn't, massively disruptive. But I had similar experiences, teachers just walking out in the middle of lessons, fights going on, things being thrown across the classroom, etc. And you know what? I kind of feel I benefited from being in a very diverse set of people, understanding different people's experiences, having to adjust to the fact that there are people who learn at different paces and rates, etc. So I think there's a value of that. But look, I don't have children, and I can absolutely understand the desire when you do have children to just think, I want the absolute best for my kids, right? That's human nature. But actually, Kevin put it perfectly, I thought, when he said, if you've got the means to do it, then you would do it. And I think that's the problem, that it is a two-tier education system. And we have, whether it's Blair and his education, whether it was the coalition and the Michael Gove reforms, which did narrow the gap in terms of the achievement of poor kids and richer kids. Most politicians genuinely do want to try and improve the state sector. But if you're taking out the group of kids that have the parents that are really engaged, either because they want to be or because they have the time to be, right, or the means to be, or they had a good education themselves, and you're leaving the kids that need more support, as we've described, that might be more disruptive, you're always going to struggle. So actually, the problem is that in whatever scenario, you're always going to have a better model because of the reasons, Kevin, you described. The kids are better behaved, the parents are more engaged, the teachers spend more time with them. They create these networks. Actually, it's not even just about the education, it's about all of the extracurricular that go around it. I bet your kids have all sorts of other opportunities to learn skills which then set them up in life. The reason I don't think that we will end up with a massive backlash, and you're right, there are, this comes up quite a lot, and I always find it somewhat hilarious when you get the Telegraph with its headline saying, social engineering, Oxford and Cambridge, want to reduce the number of private school applicants and increase the number from state school. And I kind of laugh to myself as though social engineering isn't sending your kid to a private school in the first place. But actually, if you look at, which is the story that you raised, Michelle, if you look at the disproportionate number of people in the most powerful positions, be that in media, which is terrible for representation of people from working class backgrounds, whether you look in
Not
politics.
at GB News, though, everyone, because us three, none of us went to private school.
And that is great. But I think it's something like 40-odd% of, for example, newspaper columnists went to private school. 7% of the population did. 40-odd% of the people who are doing the bulk of the commentary. It's something like 65% of senior judges did. If you look at anywhere, lawyers, doctors, politicians, journalists, there's a massively disproportionate group of people who went to private school.
Let me bring in some of my viewers. Mark says, Michelle, I send both my kids to private schools. I went to a state school and I've worked very hard and made great sacrifices in order to send my kids private. Our children were offered a state school place for a school that was in special measures. So we had no alternative, that's what he says. He says that he feels that children in private schools are now getting actively discriminated against in gaining top university places such as Oxbridge. I've got to say, there's quite a few of you. Marie sends birth of hair. You guys must be absolutely minted. You've got multiple kids in private schools, you guys. Marie sends birth of hairs to private schools. She went to state school and she says, again, she works very hard and has made great sacrifices. Again, lots of people saying that they have got their kids in private schools. Tony, though, you make a very good point. Why should I need to pay my taxes and then have to send my kids to private schools in order to get a good standard? I'm paying twice. Why aren't we focusing instead on getting state schools to aspire to be the standard of private schools?
I think, is it Tony that said that?
That is Tony.
So Tony, I think, is bang on the money. I think the issue ultimately is that it is the ambition, I think, of most sensible politicians that state schools are so good that nobody feels that they want to send their kids private to get the school they want in that particular circumstance. I would say, which is, I am actually with Charlotte. I might have two kids at independent school, but I've got no problem with the fact that Oxford and Cambridge these days are making real strides to make the balance more realistic, so they should. And also, there is a lot of work that doesn't get talked about by a lot of the independent schools, the Independent Schools Council, where increasingly they're giving a lot more scholarships and bursaries to kids from working class backgrounds. But weirdly,
it's a tiny
No,
proportion.
totally
really
disagree with that. Totally disagree
No, it
with
is.
that. Well, no, I disagree that it's. I don't think it is tiny. It's increasing in some schools. You're reaching 25-30% of the pupils in school in some
Full
independent
scholarships
schools.
to working class kids is tiny.
Well, I disagree with you on that. We'll have to come back to it because I think we hold different views. But what I would say, ultimately, people who should be allowed by the state to spend their money in the way that they want. I think that's quite a libertarian point of view, bizarrely, for me, and I think that's all right.
Well, you guys, I mean, this one has really got you talking at home. Peter, you make a very good point. You say it's not the private school that gives the kids the advantage in these careers. It's the wealthy parents' connections that provide the advantage. I think you're absolutely right. Jenny, you make a fantastic point as well. You say parents either spend their money on private education or they spend their money buying good houses in the catchment areas of the good state schools. You're saying that still makes it selective. Phil says bring back grammar schools. They never distinguish between different financial situations. Ability, you say, was the defining factor, says Phil. It's not always about ability, is it? It's about how academic you are. I used to go out with someone that went to private school. He was so thick. His friends used to call him Bungalow because he had nothing upstairs, and we always used to say to his dad, I bet you want a refund on your money. No, we're not selling to... Hey, I'll tell you what, and I'll tell you the hilarious thing, if he was watching this, he'd know exactly who he was, I could tell you. Anyway, I'll be nice there in the third part, I promise. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about COVID lockdowns. Loads of people broke the rules, let's be honest. Should our police still really be pursuing them? Or quite frankly, should they have better things to do? I think the latter. I reckon it's time for an amnesty. If you did break the rules, so what? Move on. I'm asking because some pensioner got jailed today for perverting the course of justice around COVID lockdown breaches. Do something better with your time. I've got a Twitter poll running. Tell me your thoughts and I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. There's never been a more interesting but also critical time in British politics, and I can't wait to bring you the biggest stories of the day with the best factual accuracy and also a few of my own opinions thrown in. We'll engage in passionate but always polite debate with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Monday to Thursday, 10 till 12 on TV, on radio and online.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dewbs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
On the Mark Stein Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Stein Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co. with me, Michelle Dewberry, right through till 7 o'clock with you. We're also in the studio. Kevin Craig is a former Labour councillor and the chief exec of PLMR Communications, and Charlotte Pickles, the director of the Reform think tank and a former advisor to Ian Duncan Smith. I can tell you now that private school conversation has really got you talking. Bernard, you say private pupils study more and better because they have better discipline in them than the state schools. I don't know.
As three state school attendees, I think we might take slight umbrage with that.
That the discipline is better in the private schools, he's saying.
The discipline overall will be, but I think to say that individual students don't have discipline in state school, I mean, I was going to swear there, I worked very hard at school.
Did you?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't. I used to mess around. we used to lock our supply teachers in the one of them.
That definitely happened at mine as well.
That's an awful memory. I just made myself feel really bad. We were quite mean. Anyway,
the English teacher always used to get locked in the cupboard on the corridor.
Yeah. Oh, I bet they don't do that in private school, do they? I bet they don't lock their supply teachers in.
That last comment, Michelle. There is a girl I know, Felixstowe, Evie Wedden, Felixstowe Academy, a stunning working class success story, 9 A stars. One of the hardest working disciplined kids you'll ever find in a challenged state school.
Bob says, Michelle, do you know of any politicians' children working in McDonald's or a supermarket? I don't actually, but why not? I actually think that kids should do those kind of jobs, and I think that a lot of children should, I don't know, do what you used to, is say paper round, but people don't buy papers anymore, do they? So that's not even probably a thing. Saturday jobs, they're not even a thing so much anymore, are they? Bring back the old days.
It's actually really interesting. Very few young people now do jobs at all, like if they're at school or even university. We've seen a massive drop, and I do wonder if that partly explains some of the skills challenges when people graduate and go into the office.
Well, guess what? I could talk about it all night long, but I have been told in my ear that I've got to pack it in and move on, so I will pay attention. I will exercise that discipline that we've just been talking about. You know, let's get down to it, shall we? At the end of the day, a lot in this country is a mess, not least our criminal justice system. You know, if you try reporting a crime to the police these days and getting it taken seriously, never mind a resolution, good luck with that. So it caught my eye today, so it did, the story of a 72-year-old fella who was basically serving wine and mince pies back in 2020. Guess what? He is now just been sent to jail for 6 months. Now, I do have to confess, he was in trouble for perverting the course of justice because he was tinkering around with some CCTV that he perhaps shouldn't have been. But notwithstanding that, I can't help think, Kevin, why in this day and age now are the police messing around, even looking into lockdown breaches? Why are they even knowing what he's doing with his CCTV? Why do they care? I call now for an amnesty. If you broke the rules in lockdown, move on.
I am surprisingly, perhaps to you, quite attracted by the COVID amnesty idea.
That does surprise me.
Yeah, I think.
But I welcome it.
Well, I'll tell you what the problem is. When across the country you have crimes not being investigated, when you see, which happens frequently, people physically assaulting somebody else and not getting custodial sentences, to then see, in parallel to this, a pensioner, albeit, which I really don't like what he did, is he treated our police with resentment, people who risk their lives for us, but it sticks in the throat, Michelle.
But I resented a lot of police. I remember feeding my tiny little baby on a bench and these police officers telling me that I had to move or else I would be arrested. And I remember saying to them, hey, good luck with that. I'm not going anywhere. I'm feeding my kid. They was telling me it wasn't essential exercise. And I got into a right set to with them. So I did. I was disrespectful to them because I thought they were absolutely ludicrous at times and deserved to be told. Where do you stand on it all?
I mean, I think the example you've just given is a very good example of just how crazy a lot of the rules that were put in place were, right? I mean, I think we can all agree, well, most of us would agree, looking back, that we probably should have done it quite differently. But the role of the police is to enforce the law they're given, so they don't get to choose. I mean, you know, if they are choosing, that's a bad thing. So, in theory, they're told this is now illegal, this is the guidance, this is the rules, you need to go and police it.
Yeah, but use your common sense, though, come on.
Well, and that is actually one of the problems now, that we're removing a lot of the ability for police to use their common sense, use what you would have in the past called sensible judgment, I guess.
But what about my amnesty idea? Why in present day now would any police force, any court in the land be busy processing a historical lockdown offence?
So I've no idea what the history of this particular case is, but you rightly pointed out at the top of this section, there are huge backlogs in the criminal justice system. So I don't know whether this case actually is from 12 months ago, 18 months ago, and is only just coming to court.
But I think nothing. I think if when we were in lockdown in 2020 or whatever, I don't really, you know, whatever's brought it into the current day now, I think you should have a rubber stamp. You pick it up, you go, right, lockdown related, bin. Lockdown related,
I think it's really difficult to do that. So I would be very comfortable in saying, as Kevin's saying, and you, Michelle, also said, there's a lot of crime that is going undetected, unprosecuted at the moment. And we want our police forces, quite frankly, focused on the most serious, the most kind of victim-intensive crimes, of which these are not. where I guess I'm slightly uncomfortable with the idea of an amnesty is that a justice system has to be built on fairness. It has to be built on equal treatment of people. So there were people who were prosecuted during COVID, during the pandemics, or, you know, even let's say a few months ago, if you were going to introduce an amnesty now, people who were fined, people who have been, you know, taken to court. I think it's quite difficult to say you can't now do that with different people. I think you have to have one rule for everyone.
Very final brief word to you, Kevin.
Well, Parliament could do it. You know, legislation can be passed, and I think we all agree that this is not the focus we want.
Yeah, and by the way, I mean, if you were someone, let me just very quickly give you some stats. Get this, more than £8.2 million has been collected in fines, these lockdown fines, by the way. There's sums apparently being distributed to local councils across England and Wales. What a small fortune that is. And can you imagine being that fella, the Stoke-on-Trent fella? Yes, I accept that he shouldn't have fiddled around with CCTV, but nonetheless, he broke lockdown rules, and now he's got 6 months in prison. Other people that have broke lockdown rules, by the way, they found themselves on places like reality TV, eating kangaroo bits and pieces, and in an absolute fortune, don't they? 78% of you, by the way, on my Twitter poll say that you should have an amnesty, you sensible people, you. That's all I've got time for. Charlotte, Kevin, thank you at home. Have a fantastic evening. Don't go anywhere, though, because Nigel Farage is up next.
Michelle, thank you. Michelle, thank you very much indeed. 17%, that's what the nurses are asking for, or they're going to go on the first ever national strike. I have to say, our audience question, is 17% too much? I really think it is. I guess it could be a negotiating position, but it isn't a very realistic one, in my view. We'll be debating that and much more, but first, let's get the weather.
Evening, I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Tomorrow will be fairly similar to today. A lot of cloud, gusty winds and exceptionally mild. It will still be very wet across northwest Scotland as well, where this weather front has never really shifted. Follow the isobars. They come all the way up from the far southwest, bringing with them very mild air, but also quite a lot of cloud, and particularly close to this weather front, persistent and heavy rains. We do have a Met Office yellow warning in place. There could be some further issues, maybe 100 millimetres of rain or more over the hills in this part of the world, potentially causing some flooding. A bit of drizzle elsewhere around the hills of Wales and northwest England, but many places dry. Look at these overnight temperatures, many areas staying in the teens, potentially record-breaking in some locations. Gusty winds through the night and in the morning across southeast Scotland, so we have another Met Office yellow warning in place here, particularly lively gusts, which could be dangerous for high-sided vehicles. The rain through the course of tomorrow pushes a bit further south into Scotland and across more eastern parts of Northern Ireland. Again, for most of England and Wales, it's dry. A lot of cloud, but some breaks in the cloud. A bit of sunshine. Could see temperatures up as high as 18 Celsius, so incredibly mild for the time of year. That rain will edge perhaps into northwest England, maybe northwest Wales for a time on Friday evening, before then starting to move back further north as we go into Saturday. So maybe a dull, damp start for southern Scotland and Northern Ireland, but that rain will clear away to the north on Saturday. England and Wales could be quite murky, a lot of mist and low cloud around into this weekend. But if that clears and we see a bit of sunshine, well, the winds will be lighter and temperatures could be higher.